So now we move on to I need to talk. I need to get something off my chest. Okay? I talk plenty usually, but I need you guys just to be my soundboard. Last week, Wes and I addressed the possibility of the Cleveland Indians changing their name, which is a very personal thing for me. I've been an Indians fan my whole life. I love the Indians. I love them more than any other sports team, and I want to call them the Indians my entire life. I personally don't see the Indians as a racial term, like a racial slur or derogatory. And I think that they should keep their name, even though the Redskins are changing theirs, which I agree with that. But I had brought up saying things like the Indians were named to honor Native Americans. They were named to honor Nap Lahoy, who I believe to be a Native American baseball player. Doing more research on this, I realized I had just believed all these things that were not true. Nap Lahoy was not Indian. He was French, and his nickname was the Frenchman. And the story that I was believing was getting it mixed up with one of the tales that the Indians were named after a guy named, let me look up his name, Sac Alexis. He was a truly Native American player. He was known as being Native American and highly aggressive. Kind of reminds me of like a Yasiel Puig of today. And he had an amazing arm. He played outfield. He was known as just being this electric player on the field. Kind of a controversial player. Apparently he drank a ton, which kind of made him fall into the Native American stereotype of people back then saying that, Native Americans were just drunk and everything. And he had a lot of really bad articles written about him in the Cleveland media back then. But the legend is that in 1915, after Nap Lahoy left the team, because they were called the Naps while he was a team, the Indians had a lot of really bad nicknames for years. And they never really had anything official because back then it was really just the Cleveland Baseball Club, and writers gave them nicknames in their articles and whatever, and people had different nicknames. They'd been called the Tribe before because they played like Indians, they said, because when they had this player on the team, everyone just kind of called them the Indians because they were the guys with the one Indian player, right? So 1915, after Nap Lahoy left the team, they were called the Naps during that time, and once they traded him away, they said, well, we can't be called that anymore. The owner, or the legend is that the owner made a contest of, hey, submit a team name. And someone in the legend, it says that someone proposed the Indians to honor Sac Alexis, who was an underperforming player that wasn't really like a legend for the Cleveland baseball team. I'm just going to call him Sox because that's kind of what people call him eventually. After reading this article, a guy he was an Indians fan wrote this article for NBC. He just kind of find the more investigation he put into it, the more he found that this legend probably wasn't true, which he was really disappointed by because he was a big Indians fan, wanted to stay the Indians, but he had just always thought that the Indians were made to honor the Native American race. And it appears that that's not the case. A lot of the news articles that came out after that time had a lot of racial slurs in them, and they had a lot of just making fun of Sox rather than honoring him. So it's unlikely that the team would then all of a sudden decide that they were going to honor that guy. Maybe they did, and I hope that is the case. But he argued, and I would like to argue with him, that even though the intention of someone back 105 years ago weren't necessarily pure, that the Cleveland Indians can still represent a group of people in a very respectful way that honors them and says, look, the Native American history of Northeast Ohio is rich. And they were one of the most populous areas in the country was Ohio. And I think it would be a really cool way for the Indians to continue to honor or to start honoring that team is to they've gotten rid of Chief Wahoo, which I was really upset about when it happened. But the earlier renditions of Chief Wahoo were very exaggerated features that I understand why people were upset by them. I think that the modern day version was not upsetting or not racial really, but I understand why people don't like it. But I think that they can honor the Native Americans that came before while still being the Cleveland Indians. And I hope that's what they do. It'll be really disappointing if they do end up changing their name. I think that they probably will, even though last week I thought that they would not. It just looks like it's going to change. So I am bummed about it, but I hope that they're able to find a way to honor those people rather than for people to think that they're taking advantage of a group of people that's already been taken advantage of so far or so much. That's just my personal take on it. You guys have any comments on that?
I mean, do you think there's any chance that the Indians bring in a new logo and keep the name?
Well, they already got rid of the logo. Chief
Right.
Wahoo's not used anywhere anymore.
There's no way that they can bring back Chief Wahoo, but is there a chance they bring in a different I don't know, something else.
Maybe if they have something that like says the
Kind of
word
like
for
your
cursive Indians
jerseys,
already.
I guess.
Yeah, and we have like block lettering Indians.
But
Maybe we have some kind of like a Cleveland skyline, kind of like the Cavs do, with like Indians written across it, or like a arrow maybe. But I don't think that they will, just because you're going to have people who are still complaining about it, and I don't think that they want to keep having conflict on the situation. I imagine they'll do something fresh. It looks like that everywhere that I'm reading, that the intention is that the team is going to do something totally brand new that they can call their own. That actually, one article said something that's not represented anywhere in sports. So we'll see. I'll of course still be a Cleveland baseball fan. It'll just be weird not rooting for the Indians anymore. You know what I mean?
definitely.